We made an offer on our first house in 2010. In the early months of that year, following what had been a devastating earthquake in Haiti, committing our savings and future earnings toward the hope and stability of a home felt both consequential and impossibly fortunate as the stories of loss and devastation rolled in from the island. The absence of safety and infrastructure acute in a land where many people had long suffered from poverty and want. We welcomed our firstborn the following year amid the so-called Arab Spring, that season of pro-democracy demonstrations and protests against economic hardship and authoritarian strictures, the fruits of which were uneven among the many nations and peoples where resistance bubbled up: Tunisia, Egypt, Yemen, Bahrain, Libya, Syria, Algeria, Jordan. Hope and trepidation were paired. In some cases, concessions were made by parties in power. Other regimes reacted with violence. Still others fell, driven out by the popular will for change and opportunity, though the changes that settled in may not have spelled relief even yet. Within the week that we brought that child into this complicated world, there was fevered news of a royal wedding, William and Kate, as well as the killing of Osama bin Laden. In the unyielding churn of life and death, the interspersing of celebration and sorrow, hope, action, uncertainty, possibility, and disappointment, we wonder what it means that God has entered this world and chosen the human condition as the place for holy presence. Here we are on this second Sunday of Christmas, which by luck of the calendar we sometimes get and sometimes don't before we reach Epiphany on January 6th. If you decorated with live greens, they've been shedding mercilessly. If you had time with family, or if you didn't, you might have carried the ache of things that are not as we wish them to be. Griefs can be old or new. Anger might now be sadness. The return to school looms or glistens. I see you, parents. And with no judgment if this describes your yard, there is no truer reflection of many spirits by this point than inflatable Christmas characters who still inhabit the lawn, but are no longer being inflated.
Yeah.
What I mean to say is that Christmas is a hard note to sustain for a full 12 days. No wonder the true love saves the a leaping and a piping and a drumming for the end when it's harder to keep the motivation. Christmas, the feast of the nativity of our Lord and the ongoing mystery of the incarnation that we celebrate, is a hard note to sustain, but worth wondering how it can sustain us, especially in this churning, complicated world. Not only in these 12 days of Christmas, but in our lives as Christians. How can we not merely proclaim hope, but believe it? All of the stories of Jesus' birth are tinged with earthly struggles around power and control. There is nothing new under the sun. Luke tells of Caesar Augustus and his census sending the Holy Family to Bethlehem for a best-they-could-do birth experience. And here we see Herod's shadow, that ambitious king who was threatened by news of a birth of one whose rising star might displace his own. Even as we gather on this second Sunday of Christmas, not yet to Epiphany, we do so under the emerging news of our own nation intervening in Venezuela against a sovereign whose legitimacy could be questioned and whose record of corruption and violence is unquestionably odious. Whether the ends justify the means is as real a question as whether the ends themselves can be justified. Can we parse blessing and hope amid the exhausting constancy of human corruption and power games? In the bright chaos of all that competes for our attention and compassion, can we perceive the star that calls us out of what we know and where we have been? After our latest service on Christmas Eve, or in the first hour of Christmas Day, I suppose, I drove through a quiet downtown streets, through the streets toward the highway to head home with my daughters who had served and sung that night. Incense in the air, still savoring the glorious praise of choir and brass. Mostly quiet streets. There were a few young people out for a scooter ride. Others had bedded down in the usual doorways in other partly secluded spots for night. And one young woman in an altered state moved and gestured alone at a bus stop. I don't know if she was expecting a bus. Christmas is a hard note to sustain, even on Christmas night. I believe it's why we tell the stories together, again and again. And in today's story, we remember those wise ones, the spiritual seekers from other traditions and lands who were drawn to and invited into the fullness of God's presence and love. The star that guided them was visible to them and to some extent even anticipated as they had watched and studied the skies. Herod could not see it himself. That's worth noticing. Herod could not see it himself. He recognized its presence as significant and as disruptive to what he held dear. He knew the language and the eagerness to imitate when he spoke of wanting to pay homage himself to this new king. But the practice of seeking and following another's glory was not something he knew how to do. But see how these wise seekers dared to hope and follow open-heartedly. We're told that when the star stopped, they were overwhelmed with joy. Readily they entered that house and knelt in reverence. The gifts they had brought had not been squandered to buy favor from Herod, already holding power and influence. Instead, they were laid in good faith before a child. Right. What hope is represented in that willing gesture? To favor the potential and promise of this righteous ruler, despite the entrenchment of power and violence in the established order. And so we too get to borrow images from this story to wonder about laying our own treasures before the King of Heaven in hope and celebration and belief in that kingdom of heaven, here and now, for us, within us. Our treasures of gifts and service and money toward holy need, yes, but also our treasures of heart and attention. To whom do I owe the best attention, devotion of my heart? To whom can I entrust the honest, vulnerable, open parts of my spirit? It is not the New York Times. It is not TikTok or Instagram or any other shiny thing that comes through the internet. We can watch or listen or read the same harsh news, considering this opinion and that one, wondering at the newest great destruction or offense or scandal. We do, of course, need and want some degree of connection to and understanding of the things that happen in our community and beyond. But the grief or sorrow or righteous anger or delight or shock that it provokes in us, that is a treasure we can take to the one who can be trusted with the gifts of our hearts. The one who employs no algorithm to command our attention nor seeks to sell us anything, doesn't gather our data. This one to whom we bring our reverence, fears, hope, adoration. This is the giver of every good gift. This is the one who meets us in our human condition and helps us become formed by the choreography of seeking, trusting, and showing reverence. This is the sharing of divine life with us. The salvation promised might be felt as overwhelming joy, and it might be felt in just the crumb of daily hope that we need to keep siding with love, with compassion, with life.